Do you really think I would have let this one slide? So Apple just hosted the launch event of the iPhone 15, the iPhone 15 Plus, along with some other upgrades and some of their other products, including the Apple Watch. And during this event, a lot of sustainability lingo was thrown around. I had a lot of people in my DMs asking me whether or not this was legit and if we could unpack it together. So that's what we're gonna do in this video. I heard recycled materials, I heard closing the loop, I heard carbon neutral, I heard a lot of stuff. So let's break it down and see if Apple is really as sustainable as they say they are. Also, just a quick disclaimer, I have a PC, I have an iPhone, I have a Sony camera that I'm recording this on, and all of these things I have bought secondhand. I think even if you buy secondhand, even if you buy from new, I think it is massively important that you are able to critique the companies that you in some way support. It's not really an option in 2023 to not have a phone for most people. There's always someone in the comments that try to discredit the really valid critiques of how a billion-dollar corporation is acting in the world and their impact by pointing to the fact that I also have an iPhone. So whatever Apple is doing is now suddenly not as important. You have to be able to critique the systems that you are present within. And there are companies that are so big that it's basically impossible to remove yourself from them. You have to exist and live in the world. And that is where it is really important to remember that individual consumers have very different impacts than governments and corporations. Okay, so even if you support Apple, you still should be able to critique them. I think it's massively important that you are able to do so. So before I have to explain this in the comments, that's where it's at. Moving on. Now, I always say that corporations and governments can do more for the planet than the individual consumer, and Apple is no exception. Last year, Apple saw an annual revenue of $394.3 billion with a 7.7% growth. Last year, Apple made 225.3 million global shipments of iPhones, and in 2021, that number was 240 million shipments. All I'm getting at here is this is a really influential, impactful, and powerful company. And I think it's only fair that we dissect, unpack whatever they are feeding consumers, telling consumers, and putting forward. According to Apple, about 70% of their overall emissions come from manufacturing. And it's estimated that iPhone production specifically is responsible for around 17 megatons of CO2 emissions. But the impact starts way before manufacturing. The mining of raw metals, rare earth elements, and lithium for batteries comes with quite an impact. For instance, it requires 2.2 million liters of water to produce 1 ton of lithium, and that water is often taken from areas where it was otherwise needed by local farmers, especially in South America. The mining of these materials also very often, more often than not, involve child labor. And we have been through all the details of that in the e-waste video as well. In 2019, Apple was mentioned in a lawsuit regarding the death of children in the mines in Congo. When it comes to the materials Apple is using, let's start small and focus on the recycled materials, which they use a lot of energy talking about. But I will actually like to say that they seem to be generally pretty committed to using recycled materials, which of course we love to see. However, I did have some issues finding out what materials they're using, if the recycled materials are from their own supply chain or e-waste in general, or landfill, or where they're getting their recycled materials. There is a pretty big difference between using post-consumer waste and simply leftover materials from your own supply chain, both of which can be categorized as recycled materials, but they have pretty different impacts. We want our recycled materials to be post-consumer waste because that's when you take materials out of the consumer waste stream and you reapply it or reuse it in some way instead of just adding and making more and more. So that's what we want. That's what we want because way too much, and I mean it, way too much tech today is actually not recycled. We're looking at a rate of roughly 1% of all smartphones in the world being recycled, and the majority of which end up in landfill. So when we're seeing tech companies talk about recycled materials, I really want to know exactly where they decided to get those materials from, because that can be very differently impactful. They also write on their website that by 2025, they'll be using 100% recycled cobalt in their batteries. So let's remember that and check in again in a few years, because at this point, it's pretty standard practice to say these things and then not really follow up on them. It's very easy, very free, and very legal to make promises and not keep them. So However, when it comes to the use of recycled materials, I am low-key pretty hopeful for Apple. According to Apple, the new iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Plus contains 100% recycled cobalt in the battery, 100% recycled copper in the main logic board, 70% recycled aluminium in the enclosure, 100% recycled rare earth elements in all magnets, and 100% recycled gold in the USB connector. It's really nice to see recycled materials, whatever they are, being used in these products. However, I would like to say that this is not solely done out of the goodnesses of their hearts. The second recycled materials don't generate Apple a profit, there will be a Tim Cook-shaped hole in the wall. He will be out of there that fast. In 2020, one of Apple's Canadian recycling contractors recycled over 100,000 iPhones marked for disposal, and Apple reacted by filing a lawsuit against the company. So you know. Apple is also promising that by 2030, all their products will be carbon neutral. And they're already advertising carbon neutral products. But what does that really mean? Apple is achieving carbon neutrality through a combination of renewable energy using recycled materials and supporting green projects, which is a fluffier way of explaining that they're buying carbon offsets. In 2022, Apple's gross emissions were 20.6 metric tons of CO2, which is the number they have published after their carbon offsets have been applied, meaning that the amount of emissions Apple is actively publishing isn't accurate for their supply chain because they're retracting their carbon offsetting support, which is of course very misleading when you want to know the impact of your specific phone. I have an entire impact video about carbon offsets and the issues within the carbon offsetting industry, because that's what it is. It is a massive, anything but transparent and simple industry. And when you buy carbon offsets, both as a consumer but also as a company, you're paying for someone else to do something good for the planet. You're not actually doing it yourself. And I think it's important to keep that in mind whenever we hear companies talk about their carbon neutral products. So when these companies are promising that they are lowering their emissions, they're really paying someone else, somewhere else in the world to do that, to do something carbon negative. So you don't actually have to do it. So you can keep producing the amount of products that you did before. Then you don't actually have to lower your own emissions. Everybody wants to lower their own emissions without actually doing it. I also just realized that I am wearing the same color as my couch. But Apple is also committed to renewable energy and the recycled materials, which obviously also helps to lower their production emissions. And I do like to see that, but the focus on something being carbon neutral to the extent we're seeing it in Apple's launch on their website and in their advertising is misleading. At least the impact of Apple goes far beyond what energy supplier they have. Also, I think it's important to mention that many of these carbon offsetting suppliers are actually not delivering the amount of offsets that they're promising either. So carbon offsetting often sounds too good to be true, which means that it often is. In 2020, Apple stopped including chargers with the purchase of the new iPhones, which was quite controversial. According to the brand, the majority of iPhone buyers already own multiple cables, and by excluding them in the box, a lot more devices could fit in a shipping pallet, saving an annual 2 million metric tons of carbon. Neat. And while that definitely sounds positive, Apple began shipping all new iPhones with the Lightning to USB-C cable instead of the older Lightning to USB-A connector. This new cable wasn't compatible with the 2 million iPhone chargers already on the market, so most users had to go out and buy a new charger anyway, adding to the growing e-waste problem. Also, Apple kept the price of the iPhone the same after excluding the charger, which just means extra profit for them. So I can at least contain my excitement when it comes to the fact that they left out the charger. Also, Apple has announced that they are now switching from the Lightning to the USB-C cable, which is also not done out of the goodnesses of their hearts. Actually, they have to. And the way they're presenting it definitely makes it sound like it's their innovation or it's their idea, when in fact, they're just complying with local regulation. The European Parliament is forcing them to do it because they are rolling out a law that makes it illegal to not use a versatile and universal charger, which will be the USB-C. So they have to do it. It's not innovation, it's the law. When we talk about the impact of smartphones, it's really necessary to also talk about e-waste or electronic waste, because this category of waste is the fastest growing category of waste we're seeing. And taking into account the impact, price, and material ratio, we are not throwing away any other item, any consumer good in the same rate. The average amount of time a consumer is using a smartphone is roughly between 1 and 2 years. And so little of this material gets recycled. And I think it's important to note that this is not something consumers woke up one day and decided to do. Tech companies like Apple depend on the disposal and renewal of products. That's why you see Apple making such a big fuss out of their new iPhone launch, because they're depending on consumers to throw away what they already own and go exchange it for something new. They've even made that exchange super easy for you to do with their trade-in program, which means that you give them your old phone and you get a discount on your new phone. Does that sound familiar? Let me know. What we're seeing here is overconsumption disguised as innovation. And this is by no means a new phenomenon. But we have to stop being so excited about the launch of new products when in fact they are minute changes that we are seeing to something that we already own. These new products are so minimally different from what we already have. Now we're getting a dynamic island, different colored iPhones, and new straps for the Apple Watch, and other small minute changes that is not worth making any fuss over, and is definitely not worth replacing your old phone for. I would say Apple is an absolute master of masking overconsumption as innovation. And Apple sure has the eco-lingo down to overwin skeptic consumers, using terms like carbon neutral, closing the loop, whatever that means, something about circularity, which I have yet to see any significant proven documentation for, and recycled materials, renewable energy, all this kind of stuff, which on paper is great. And I would like to say credit where credit is due, because they are making some great changes in their manufacturing process of their phones. However, that is not the main issue with what Apple is doing. It's the fact that they are making new models that replace old models so ever-giving fucking fast, and in the process nudging consumers to buy something they already own. It's literally their business model. Meanwhile, the most sustainable thing to do would be to create a business model that rely on making things last, making consumers able to use the devices for as long as possible, which Apple is not doing. It would mean designing products both with hardware and software that can be used over and over for years and years without requiring new updates. And Apple is doing the opposite of that. There should be no doubt that profit is what speaks the loudest for Apple, no matter how much fluffy sustainability lingo they use to disguise it. And of course, companies have to make money. I get that. And this is going to sound incredibly utopic, but I don't think companies should be making this much money. At least what they make should to some extent be returned to the planet, to people, instead of lining the pockets of CEOs and directors who already live lavish lifestyles. Meanwhile, the workers in the factories are extremely underpaid, not even earning a living wage. Ultimately, I don't think there's any way of becoming a sustainable company unless you have a plan to decrease production and as such making less products and less money. You cannot maintain or increase production speed and also call yourself a sustainable company. Those two are opposites of each other. But at the very least, you cannot praise yourself for being a sustainable company if your business model relies on overconsumption. And that's no matter how much renewable energy you use in your factories. So what can consumers do? Well, first of all, use the devices you have for as long as possible. The most sustainable product is the thing you already own. Take good care of them and repair them to the extent that that's possible. Don't ever buy the newest model, not if you're looking for a new phone in the first place, and especially not if you already have something that works. But even if you have to replace your phone, try to not go for the latest model either way. Or even better, buy a refurbished or secondhand phone. Many reselling places that have different types of smartphones even come with the same warranties and guarantees as a new phone would. Then you get a phone you like without supporting the company directly. As they say, you vote with your money, so ignore the temptation of getting the newest stuff. That's what the companies want you to do, and it's not the best for you, your finances, or the planet. I would like to end this on a complaint, by the way, because I am so thoroughly tired of seeing companies like this get away with the easy type of sustainability. Changing energy supply in your factory is easy sustainability. Changing your business model, much better sustainability. Meanwhile, consumers are often the ones that's left with the actual, concrete, direct sustainability action and the lifestyle changes. All the stuff that's not just talk, but that's actually action. It's up to us, which is so incredibly frustrating when we don't have the same impact and the same means as a billion-dollar corporation. I wish we would confront these companies more with their own values. You cannot call yourself a sustainable company and then rely on planned obsolescence and overconsumption in your business model. It's pretty easy to call yourself sustainable when you offset your carbon footprint. Meanwhile, consumers are the ones that actually suspected to do all the work. we should just hold these companies to a higher standard. You cannot call yourself sustainable if your business model is anything but. That's it for this video, guys. I hope that you liked it. Leave your thoughts and comments down below. I would love to hear what you guys think. Also, let me know if you have any future requests. Keep updating me on what you want to see, especially for the Impact series. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. That would make my day. And give this video a thumbs up so we can boost that engagement. That would be amazing for me. No. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day and take really good care of yourselves. Until next time. Bye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!